preseason game, how the Raiders look offensively, defensively, all that different stuff. But one of the things that stood out to me is, and we've kind of seen this here and there with Max, is the lack of protection at times. And like Max Crosby, we know he is an all-world type of player and is going to get his, and he's done that from time to time. But I feel like on the whole, they've done a pretty decent job of corralling him. You know, it hasn't been stretches of like, oh man, 3-4 days in a row where Max wrecking things, right, Ryan? But in this one, we hear about the pressure that Kirk and Fernando were facing. Does that make you guys worry a bit about the tackles, or how do you kind of, I guess, analyze what we heard about the pressure that they were both feeling, mostly on the edges with DJ Glaze and Colton Miller?
Yeah, it's one of the issues that is one of the things we were concerned about going into training camp is can DJ Glaze have a bounce back year, and how will Colton Miller look after missing the majority of last season due to an ankle injury that he suffered, I believe, in week 4. So yeah, it's concerning just a bit because we saw what happened last year with Geno Smith and how that offensive line fell apart. And Geno Smith had his fair share of struggles, but the Raiders didn't do nothing to help him out with that type of with the lack of protection. And I think they're going to be better because you add Tyler Linderbaum. So, but it's still that right tackle spot is really has been a concern. And there's times where DJ Glaze has looked good in practice, and there's times where he looks overwhelmed going against Max Crosby, and Max Crosby is getting, even in the practice we watched, Max Crosby's getting home, or DJ Glaze is getting called for holding because he just cannot contain Max Crosby to the highest level. So yeah, this was something like, I know a lot of fans were shocked that the Raiders didn't go try to get a offensive tackle in free agency. They're really trusting in that continuity that, both tackles, Miller and Glaze, already has, and believe their offensive line coach, Rick Dennison, can get the most out of them. But still, like, it's still, one joint practice. We still have a lot more football to go. So maybe, we'll see better results. And, you're going against one of the better defenses in the league. So that is a big test. And it's not surprising that those guys will face concerns, just given how good the Texan defense is.
Well, TJ, kind of to that point, like I know you said you don't pay a ton of attention to the O-line, but and I know last year, as bad as it was protection-wise, it was such a big issue for him. But from a fan perspective side of it, do you guys, for the folks that you talk to, are they like, hey, look, yeah, we can't correct everything in an offseason, or is it like, damn, it was malpractice not to fix the right tackle spot? How do you think a lot of fans really go about that? As it pertains, I guess, to this joint practice.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were, like me included, of course, I dive deep into the offensive line like that, but of course, this offseason, I thought it would have been a perfect time to go and, bolster up that offensive line, of course, the center spot, the guard spots, and the right tackle, especially the right tackle spot, which I was surprised they didn't address it at all. And just going with the same guys that they did have. Of course, they brought in some veterans, and Tyler was the biggest move for sure. And he'll hop a lot, but to what extent we don't know yet. And just seeing this practice, I'm not gonna say I'm too worried, but I'm a little bit worried, But then again, they're going up against 2 Max Crosbys. I know CJ Stroud was asked.
Keep in mind who they're going against.
He was asked about Max Crosby, and he's like, Max is great, and all that, but I go against 2 Max Crosbys every practice. So, but for the Raiders, we don't usually deal with that. So, when you're going against the best, you're gonna struggle. But like I said, it's what you learn from that. After what I've seen against the Cardinals, even though their pass rush isn't the same to what the Texans are, I think they're going to do a much better job than last year. We just don't know, to what extent. I the pressure part of things, for the quarterbacks, I think, like I said, it's good to see because then you get to see what you have in these quarterbacks, especially Fernando Mendoza and how he responds to that. But like I said, it's just joint practice. I won't really worry until we go into the regular season with these ones and see how they look. It's just keeping that same. I think the main thing is keeping that camaraderie, and until it's bad, then that's when I'll press the panic button on them.
Yeah. Ryan, your thoughts. Oh, go ahead. What's up?
No, I was gonna ask you real quick, with the whole JPJ situation, real quick, because I know he didn't travel, and then also
he traveled. He's not he there. He just didn't.
Oh, he did travel.
Yeah. He just was there in street clothes. Yeah.
Okay, but he's not gonna play for this preseason game.
At least that's.
Is it anything to really worry about to go into the season, or it's just something they're just being cautious with?
Yeah, not 100% sure. Ryan, do you have any reporting on that one?
Yeah, JPJ's injury is more of a short term thing. Short term injury. They're not expecting to be something that should prolong for too long, shouldn't prolong. But as always with a lot of these injuries, they've been, they want to be cautious and make sure everyone's fully healthy, by week one. But just even ESPN insider Jeremy Fowler, he also reported as well that JPJ, the injury is not too much of a concern. It's more of a minor thing. They're just being cautious.
Yeah,
Okay.
but see, the interesting thing to me with all of that, though, and I'm glad you brought that up, TJ, because this was something I did want to get into, is like, the conversation with Mendoza and the ones and him trying to battle and everything. Like, at least his performance against the Texans may or may not make the coaches have to sit back and be like, okay, we have to have a conversation about this and what he showed. And I think at this right guard spot, like we've said many times, this is the only rotation they've had along the starting quote unquote offensive line thus far throughout training camp. And now that JPJ wasn't there for, the most important practice of training camp, right? Like that's not a stretch to say. And then is now not going to be available for the preseason game as well, at least is what Clint was saying. Then that opens the door for Caleb Rogers to start and plant those seeds of doubt even further, where there were already questions about, is Jackson the answer at right guard, as evidenced by the fact that they're cycling through these guys, right?
Yeah. No, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I was gonna say I
yeah.
agree with you on my bad. I was gonna say I agree with you on that real quick. I agree with you because especially going into this game, this is a big this is gonna be a big test for Caleb Rogers to see what he has, right? Because like you guys have been stating all offseason long, like they've been rotating at practices. So now he'll get those first team reps if they do play in this game to see what we have in Caleb Rogers. And then, like you said, just like Fernando, like this is their audition to see what we have in them and if we should take it seriously or not. Yeah.
Yeah, the way I looked at it. Go ahead, Ryan.
I still think at the end of the day, if JPJ is healthy by week one, he's still the starting right guard.
Yeah.
Even though they've been alternating reps, like when you count it, I think JPJ still gets the majority of the first team reps, even in those alternations. And I think also too that's important. I think it's also more so of that JPJ has had his fair share of injury problems since he's been in the league. So you kind of want to put that into perspective, and why I think that's another reason why you want Caleb Rogers to kind of get those first team reps as well, because I think those reps are important because we saw, like I always go back to last year, we saw as soon as they took one piece out of the puzzle, the whole thing everything just collapsed.
Yeah.
So I think even if Caleb Rogers doesn't win the starting right guard job, which I don't think he will, unless JPJ goes into week one injured, I think those are still very useful reps to not only kind of see where you're at from a depth standpoint, because you never know, they might need him at some point down the road, and he already has those reps. So I think yesterday in that joint practice, getting those reps with the ones for the most part, I think that's very good experience for Caleb Rogers. But yeah, I'm interested to see how this plays out. Like I said, I think JPJ is still a starter on this offensive line, but this is the second straight year where we've seen him in this competition for guard. So I don't know how maybe the coaching staff views him differently than everyone else does. It's just been interesting to see how out of all the guys we've seen on the offensive line over the last two seasons, it is Jackson Powers Johnson that's always in a competition with somebody.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good thing to point out because, again, that tells you something, right? I mean, this is now two coaching staffs that has done that. Also, too, like we haven't seen Jackson work at center at all. I know there was a lot made about like the switch from center to guard and all that stuff. And now this is a staff that people respect, and they don't have him working at center at all. And I know they have Tyler Linderbaum, and the whole goal is to put the best five out there, but he hasn't been working as like a backup center or anything like that. They got Trey Zune doing that. They have Jordan Meredith doing that. They have Will Putnam doing that. I think those are things that people need to take into account with it. Also, too, just for the simple fact, like Ryan, I'm glad that you brought it up about the snap share. It has leaned heavier towards JPJ between him and Caleb Rogers. But I wonder with this, like, does that open the door to where maybe it was 60-40, 70-30 before? Does it become 50-50 now when JPJ is healthy? And that starts to help Caleb in this competition, or does it become 60-40 swaying towards Caleb if he impresses him? Like, what does that look like?